Hi, friends. Nick here. I'm still reflecting on what an absolute masterpiece Andor was from start to finish. With so much mediocre TV out there, even with massive budgets, I keep coming back to why Andor succeeded, where something like Section 31 failed miserably. And the thing I keep landing on is one word: tone. Let's take a step back and look at this through the lens of the genre. Andor may be a gritty war story about a small group of people from different backgrounds fighting an overwhelming fascist regime, but at its core, it's still science fiction. And science fiction has always been a genre uniquely suited to exploring full spectrum of the human experience. Star Wars was born in the shadow of Vietnam and Watergate, at a time when public trust in institutions had crumbled. Star Trek, just a decade earlier, debuted during the civil rights movement and widespread social unrest. Its diverse crew was a deliberate vision of racial harmony and unity at a time when America was deeply divided. And even earlier, The Twilight Zone, created by Rod Serling, set the gold standard for socially conscious sci-fi. Under heavy network censorship in the early 60s, Serling smuggled in bold allegories about racism, authoritarianism, and war, laying the groundwork for future franchises like Star Trek and Star Wars to follow. Tony Gilroy, the showrunner of Andor, admitted he wasn't a lifelong Star Wars fan, and that distance turned out to be his greatest strength. While reverence can inspire, too much nostalgia can become a creative trap. Gilroy wasn't trying to recreate Star Wars. He was telling a grounded human story about rebellion, oppression, and moral compromise, using the Star Wars galaxy as his canvas. That approach reminds me of Nicholas Meyer's work on Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Meyer, an outsider to Trek at the time, brought a literary humanistic tone that redefined the franchise. The result? A sequel still widely considered the best Star Trek film ever made. In both cases, fresh eyes gave iconic worlds the edge they needed. Now, plenty of YouTube channels have broken down Andor's success. Its incredible cast, led by Diego Luna, the decision to film in real locations instead of relying solely on green screens and digital volume sets. And even when effects were used, the performances were so focused, I wasn't watching the background. I was leaning in to the characters. But all of that means nothing without the writing. Gilroy took tropes we've seen before: resistance cells, fascism, covert sabotage, and translated them into a galaxy far, far away. That's what Andor does. It shows the cost of the rebellion, not just its heroism. You feel it in every decision, every betrayal, every loss. Even the billions of Andor are fully realized. The ISB agents, the bureaucrats, the officers, they aren't just evil for the sake of it. They're part of a machine. Some of them believe they're doing the right thing. That kind of nuance is rare, and it's what makes the show unforgettable. Now let's talk about Section 31, which, believe it or not, actually came out this year. And I say that with a mix of disbelief and disappointment. For context, I'm equally a fan of Star Wars and Star Trek. I'm a child of the 80s. My dad owned one of the first commercially available VCRs, and we recorded everything off TV. I still remember when the original trilogy aired on network television, commercials and all, and we taped it like it was sacred. I grew up setting timers to record Next Generation, Voyager, Deep Space Nine, Enterprise. That's how old I am. These franchises have always been with me. They shaped how I see storytelling, ethics, and yes, escapism. And as the great Arthur C. Clarke once put, the only people who don't like escapism is jailers. Because Star Trek and Star Wars don't just explore societies, they offer a way out of it. Star Trek, in many ways, is the optimistic flip side of Star Wars. Humanity has survived, evolved, and eliminated hunger, poverty, and prejudice. Conflict doesn't come from within, it comes from the unknown, from the stars. But in the later Star Trek spinoff, Deep Space Nine, it challenged that notion. That's where we meet Section 31, an unofficial, off-the-books intelligence group that claims to protect the Federation by doing the things Starfleet won't. It predates the Federation itself, suggesting that even utopias need watchdogs. It's chilling and fascinating, Because if you believe in a peaceful society built on cooperation and free will, how do you defend it without violating those very values? But Andor tackled that same question, but from the other end. The Imperial Security Bureau, or ISB, is what happens when the shadows take over. It's state violence as bureaucracy. No pretense, no restraint. Section 31 is more like the CIA, covert, morally flexible, and convinced it's saving lives. If told well, that's a compelling premise for a story. But the Section 31 film just doesn't go there. What we got was a film that was cobbled together, tonally unsure, plot-wise, it meanders despite Michelle Yeoh's screen presence. The character isn't given the material to carry the weight. The movie hints at ideas, betrayal, secrecy, loyalty, but it never really explores them. Visually, it's flat. It looks like a glorified Discovery episode. The production feels like TV. The action is overcut. The cinematography is overly bright, never building tension. And the biggest failure, it doesn't ask the hard questions. It doesn't dig into the ethical ambiguity that made Section 31 fascinating in the first place. Instead, it flails between tones. It wants to be a spy thriller, a character drama, a quippy space adventure all at once. One minute we're getting emotional stakes, the next we're watching a Marvel light banter from disposable side characters. You can feel the tug of war behind the scenes. It wanted to be Andor and ended up feeling like a knockoff of Guardians of the Galaxy minus the charm. And let's talk about the editing. With more quick cuts than Liam Neeson trying to scale a fence, the film is in a rush to keep itself moving, probably because it feels less like a film and more like a rescue mission stitched together with from dozens of studio notes. So what would I have done? I'd lean into what makes Michelle Yeoh compelling. Her presence, her intensity, her precision. I'd send Giorgio not to some vague corner of the timeline, but to the 2170s, the fragile, chaotic founding era of the Federation. She's been lying low off the grid when she's pulled back in by the earliest version of Section 31. And here we bring back Scott Bakula as Jonathan Archer, former captain of the Enterprise. Decades on, he's now the first Federation president. He doesn't trust her and she doesn't care. But he needs her. The Romulans are stirring, testing the Federation's strength, and everything they've built is hanging by a thread. Archer must work with her to save the Federation, but he also is forced to confront the moral compromises she represents. Giorgio becomes a living reminder of what the Federation may need to sacrifice to survive. Archer, the eternal optimist, still carries the scars of the Xindi crisis, and in her, he sees a reflection of what he once became and what he fears he might become again. It's political, it's personal, and it asks the question Star Trek was built to ask. What do you sacrifice to protect your ideals? And that brings us full circle back to Andor. Because at their core, both Andor and Section 31 are stories about sacrifice, about what people are willing to give up for their causes. The difference? Andor shows us the cost. Every character surrenders something: safety, identity, morality. It trusts the audience to sit in that discomfort and reflect on it. The Section 31 film we got only gestures at sacrifice, but never earns it. It talks about a price to be paid, but it never makes us feel the toll. And that's the difference between storytelling that hits and storytelling that misses. But that's just my take. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe and drop a comment below. I'm Nick. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next video.